Hello and welcome back to the Reclaiming Your Embodied Power Virtual Summit. I'm your co-host, Jamera Payne, founder of the Velvet Sun Tarot. And today we are speaking with and learning from Kristen Donat. I don't think I've ever said your last name out loud.
It's Donat, actually.
Donat. Okay. Yeah. I was like, I don't think I've ever said that out loud. Your other co-host for this virtual summit. A little bit about Kristen. Kristen is a certified Holy Fire Reiki teacher and spiritual life coach, a grounded group facilitator, and sacred earth priestess. She helps others come back into deep relationships with their inner power and their soul's calling. Welcome, welcome. I definitely agree with that last, help others come back into deep relationship with their inner power and their soul's calling. I have worked with Kristen before. I've had her do her Reiki magic on me, and it is like, you do feel that deep sense of coming back to yourself, that deep sense of calm. How long have you been doing Reiki? Like, what was your first experience with needing to come back to, yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I've been working with Reiki for probably the past 7 years or so.
Okay.
But I do feel like that kind of call to come home to myself happened much earlier than that, probably in high school when, those times are really hard. It's really easy to kind of be pulled around by other people's priorities and kind of do what the crowd is doing. And I feel like I had some moments in that time that really, really shook me up and invited me to really come back to myself, to remember that I am my lifelong friend. I'm the only person who will be in my life forever.
Yes.
Yeah. And so to really claim that relationship, right? And to honor that relationship, which granted, in this society is actually really challenging. It's really challenging to prioritize ourselves and to be in relationship with ourselves in that way, especially as folks socialized as women who are told to kind of prioritize others, right? There's this idea that loving ourselves is selfish or bad in some way. There's also a lot of stories that say that we can't be loved or we have to wait to be loved to love ourselves, right? We have to wait for someone else's love in order to be lovable versus first we love ourselves and then love flows in. And so I feel like when I think of Reiki and working with Reiki, there's a lot of, different individuals who practice and different stories of lineage. But to me, Reiki really is the energy of unconditional love, this sacred, divine love. And working with it has really supported me in untangling some of the barriers to loving myself, in kind of overcoming some of that shame around prioritizing myself, right? Where it's hard sometimes to tell people no, right? And, I know I have a lot of people pleasing tendencies. And so I've
1000% for me too. Yes.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so that that people pleasing, while it can feel good in the moment, I feel over the long term, it ends up degrading my relationship with myself because I'm not honoring myself. I'm telling myself I come last, right? I'm telling myself that my needs and priorities don't matter, which to me then disintegrates my relationship with self, right? It creates this mistrust with myself. It creates just a severed kind of relationship. And where I think it's so potent for us to come back into relationship with ourselves, because when we are in deep relationship with ourselves, we can be in deeper relationship with others.
Yeah. And that reminds me, in the summit interview with Emily, we had talked about getting in touch with her psychic mediumship abilities and how that tuning into her intuition really improved not only the relationship with herself, but the relationship with her partner. She had stated she felt like she couldn't give the love to somebody else because she couldn't even give it to herself because she was just so bogged down by everyone on the outside. And I completely relate to that too. If you're socialized as a woman in the Western world, you most likely are taught other people's needs come before your own, this mothering instinct or that, either comes naturally or is fed to us by media and, other social pressure of, everyone else comes first. And I wanted to circle back to something you had said earlier too, because I don't remember what it was talking about, how self-love is this relationship with yourself that you create. And I think a lot of people, in a capitalistic society, we're really taught self-love comes from taking special bubble
Yes.
baths or buying a bottle of rosé or
Yes.
whatever.
Yep.
And I love that you said, like, no, it's really coming back to yourself. Like, what is your internal relationship?
Yep.
That is the thing that's going to really bring self-love. And I really love that you said that.
Yeah. And I think that like that tendency to look externally is super common within this like capitalistic society, within patriarchy, within white supremacy, right? We're taught to like look for like to external authority for answers, for knowledge, right? For even like salvation. When I think of like kind of like the main dominant like story of Christianity, right? Like we're looking outside ourselves for a savior, when like in fact, like we are our own like saviors, right? Like we are
the God. Yep.
Yeah, right. Like we are like divinity incarnate, and we are here to really, in my opinion, at least, like reclaim that relationship. That relationship has been severed, taken from us, right? Over thousands and thousands of years, right? Like we've been taught to mistrust ourselves. We've been punished for listening to our inner wisdom. We've been targeted if we've been too deeply in love with ourselves, right? In pleasure, right? I think that's another big piece that has been coming alive for me a lot, right? Is that like the energy of pleasure is super, super connected to the energy of the divine, to the energy of abundance, right?
Yeah.
And yet within this like Western society, we've been taught that like pleasure is dirty, especially as women, right? That our pleasure is dirty and bad and wrong. And yet there are so many societies from ancient times that saw sexuality as sacred, right? A way to experience like divine love in these physical bodies, a way of like honoring like life, right? And so I think that like that's the other piece when I think of coming back into relationship. And some folks think of like self-love, like the only thing they can think is like self-pleasuring. And then that is bad, right? As if like loving on ourselves can only first be sexual, which I definitely don't agree with.
I was going to say that too. I think
like,
a lot of people think too, it has to be something sexual. And it's like giving yourself a compliment in the mirror is self-love, or, you know what
like
I mean?
Taking an extra moment,
you know?
Exactly, right? Like taking an extra moment to like, you know, brush your teeth. Like that is self-love. You know what I mean? Where it's like when we stop, like I think of like when I used to work in retail and it was super, super fast paced. And one of the ways I showed myself love was by like slowing down when I went to the bathroom and not feeling like I had to rush to get back out there, and like letting myself wash my hands. You know what I mean? Like letting myself sit for a second, like not feeling like I had to like urgently run back, which like is totally how we're programmed, totally how the society wants us to function. And yet to love myself in those moments was to slow down, right? Was to do a little bit less, which again, right, is breaking patterns, right? Is breaking away from this kind of like norm that we're supposed to fit into, which can be scary, right? Because like that can cause us to have triggers of like abandonment stuff or like ostracizing, right? Which is like,
I was just about to say, you feel, especially if you were the first one in your kind of friend group, family, or whatever, to really take on this journey, it can feel very isolating at first. And then our brains are wired to be part of a tribe. So of course, it doesn't realize it's 2022 and you're totally safe if you're, you know, on your own for a little bit. But it's, I love the acknowledgement that it's so easy to say, love yourself, come back to yourself. But the fear of rejection, abandonment, that is a very real feeling. That
super real. And like, I want to name too, that like, it exists in a lot of our family structures, right? So like, I think of this with like women in my family who like, at this point in my life, I'm not as close with, who like, if I try to set a boundary, right? If I try to prioritize myself, all of a sudden I'm attacked, right? I'm bad, right? I'm not allowed to do that because maybe they weren't allowed to do that because they had been taught, you know? And so we unintentionally like repeat these cycles on each other, right? Where it's like, we won't let other people or won't respect other people's boundaries, right? We're like, I know that that's happened to me a lot too, right? Where when I'm learning to set boundaries, I also have to learn to respect people's boundaries, right?
Yes,
right? And like realize that like the boundary doesn't mean they don't love me. The boundary doesn't mean they don't want to spend time with me, right? That like, it has actually nothing to do with me.
Yes.
Right? And that I feel like is the piece that's really hard, because it's so easy. It's just so easy to trigger some of like, you know, the inner child stuff and like all of that fear of losing love, right? Where like, again, and like circling back where it's like that fear of losing love, it's like, what happens when we fill ourselves up with love,
Yes,
right? Like,
yes,
so that
yeah,
we're so overflowing with love that it's like, there is no loss of love, right? Like there's
yes,
so much love. Like there's not,
yeah,
yeah, like a boundary doesn't mean like, oh, now I'm not lovable or I won't receive love. It just means that like
yeah,
that person literally like needs to tend to themselves. And I just need to respect that. Which is
yes.
a super hard lesson to learn. It takes time and
It takes
practice.
a
Like,
lot of time, yeah, and it takes a lot of honesty, I think, with yourself to, because I have that too, like if someone, yeah, puts a boundary, or if my partner's like, hey, I'm just gonna go do this thing by myself, I then, my first instinct is, oh no, they're gonna do this thing and then they're gonna leave me, and oh, I'm gonna be destitute by myself. And in moments like that, I have to be like, okay, well, how am I not showing myself compassion? Like, what part of me is, I literally do close my eyes and go through all the Jamiras of the past. And I'm like, okay, which Jamira of the past is being triggered right now? And then try to relive it. I mean, it is like a really big process. And I think self-compassion
yes.
is one of the biggest keys to that, because it is, you're right, it's never about you, it's always about the other person. But because we want to belong,
yeah,
we're going to take everything personally. And I think this work of coming back to yourself, getting in tune with your body, it just helps, it has helped me depersonalize so many things, to realize like, it's not about me. It's about the person and what they're going through, or whatever. And that space, especially being people pleasers, we tend to not want to give people space, because if we give them space, then that's abandonment.
Yeah.
But I always love reminding myself, like, that space is actually going to allow love, compassion, self-actualization to grow, because you're so busy being in everyone else's bodies and spaces, then you're never in your own and able to grow. So.
Yeah. And I feel like the other way that like the Reiki energy healing and just like getting in touch with like almost like sacred life force, right? Because it's like there is like energy healing that we can do that's like it's just our energy. And the Reiki differs a little bit, right? Because it comes from this like original source power, right?
Yeah.
And when like we're talking about all these different like issues of abandonment and all of that, right? Like there is also a spiritual element to that, right? Where it's like in my worldview, right? We're all like pieces of the same divine fire. And yet, right, there is this sense of separation because we're in physical bodies, right? So we've been, if I think of it as like soul, spirit is the ocean and we're one cup, in a way, there's like a severing there, right? Like there is this like feeling, right? Maybe not consciously, of like, we've been severed from this consciousness, from this whole.
Yeah.
And when we come back into relationship with this, like with this Reiki, with this divine energy, with the energy of source that's in us, all of a sudden we remember that that separation is just like in our human brains, right? Like it's not real, right? And so like when we heal that kind of like wounding of like feeling like severed, right? Like where we're physically, we are separate, right? We are in bodies, we're separate. And yet we are still one, right? We're still connected. We're still part of the same source love. We're still all like one. And so I feel like that has been super nourishing and healing for me. Like as someone who like straight up like did not believe in God when I was young, like was super resistant to organized religion, was like super like not about spirituality, and like really found my way there through different mythology from different cultures, right? Through friends who kind of like planted seeds. And then eventually like the Reiki came into my life at the perfect time. And I came like, I didn't think of it as like spiritual energy at the time. I was like, oh, this is just like healing energy. Like, this is great. This is nice. And as I worked with it, I realized that like, it's so much more than that, that it is that like unconditional love that in a way, I feel like I've been seeking, right? I've been seeking it in others. I've been seeking it in items. I've been seeking it in my job. I've been seeking it everywhere outside of myself. And like the lesson I feel like that came through was like, it's here. It's always been here. And you can always access it. And like, it won't ever go away, right? It doesn't matter what we do, what we don't do. Like if we like fulfill our soul calling or destiny, or we just do whatever we want, like it's still there. We're still lovable. We're still, super connected to all of life. And that's where I feel like some of the like challenges with like modern day kind of like organized religion and different things like that have really like stolen the sacredness of our beingness, of our relationships, right? Where like relationships in a way are super sacred, right? And yet like many of us feel kind of like, maybe a disconnection or a triggering from thinking about things as sacred, right? Or it feels like really hard to grasp. And yet, like, when I think of coming back into relationship with myself, so much of that is about like remembering my sacredness, my inherent worth, right? Like, and honoring that.
Yeah, I really love that I mean, speaking about interconnectedness, that statement reminded me of the interview that I had done with Regina, because we had talked about the phrase frog in my, or a lump in my throat, or frog in my throat, or whatever, and how that became a phrase because like one person said it and so many people were like, oh my God, I feel that same thing too. And we're talking about, you know, swaying when you when you feel anxious or something, and how like it is a reminder, like we are all these separate bodies, separate beings, but we tend to have, you know, the same reactions, the same tendencies, the same internal feelings. And it is because we all share that same ocean water. If we're going to do the cup thing, you know, we are all the same ocean, just in these individual little cups. I really like that. That analogy that you said.
That I don't remember where I found that. It was in some book, but like, that like resonated so deeply with me when I like read that. Cause again, it's like our human brains have such a hard time like holding the vastness that is like the universe,
and they're not supposed to,
right?
You know what
exactly,
I mean? But
right?
Continually try to force it.
And so I feel like what you're speaking to as well, of like us all having these very like similar body experiences and similar, I feel like that's like the other space where it's so powerful for us to come back into our bodies together, right? Not just alone, but like in community, in groups, because like we validate each other's experiences, right? Where it's like, I might think I'm having some like insane experience, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I felt the same thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So like, you know, there's this like resonance where it's like, is this a thing? And someone else is like, oh, here's what I've experienced. You know, I experienced Reiki as like tingling and heat and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, that's what that was. Right. Cause sometimes like coming back into our bodies after years of disconnection is scary, right? Like all of the different sensations, all of the kind of like connecting in with that like conscious, like vast consciousness, it's scary. It can be overwhelming. And so when we're in community and we can kind of like hold different pieces and reflect, right? Because we're all mirrors for each other. So we can reflect back to each other the experiences that we're having in a way that like makes us feel like a sense of like saneness, right? Like, oh this is okay. This is normal. Whatever, you know, makes us feel comfortable in the experience as opposed to fighting it or attaching all of these kind of like negative connotations to it. We can see, oh, I'm not alone in this experience. Like this is something a lot of us has felt. I can hold this with more pride now. Like,
And the thing about, I love that, coming into a community to experience these experiences, these whatever, experience these experiences, is really validating, because our brains are, you know, electric jelly supercomputers in our heads that like to think of themselves as different than our body. Like we think of our brain than our body, but they're together. And I when I first was learning to get back into my body, for instance, the thing that really set it off for me is I realized every time I got goosebumps, I would detect that as something bad. Like I'm really scared, I'm really anxious, like I don't want goosebumps, whatever. And coming back into realizing like there's a lot of signals, and that if I just close my eyes and let my brain freak out but let my body process it, the goosebumps are gone in 2 seconds. Like our brains, because I've found that they love thinking, they're programmed to find answers. So if you have fed the answer of goosebumps are bad, then you kind of don't want to ever challenge that, because our brains are wanting to be right all the time. So the acknowledgement of it's scary, it can be really hard, it can literally feel like your brain and your body are at odds and they're fighting, but really I read somewhere that it takes about 90 seconds for your brain and your body to get on the same page when you're having a big emotional reaction. Because it is like I don't know, it is, I don't know where I'm kind of going with this, but it is like, it feels like these two separate entities at odds. And this, I guess where I'm going is this work has really helped me realize they're not at odds. They're just kind of on two different speeds.
Yeah.
One's dial up and one's why. I don't even know if that makes sense, but
yeah, well, and
going with the computer.
It's making me think too that like, it's like our brains love to create stories, right?
Yes.
And so when we're having a body experience, the first thing that our brain does is start to make a story about it. And it roots that story in the stories we've heard, in the experiences that we've had, right? And so for many of us who are doing this reclamation work of coming back into our embodied power, like this is not work that we can look and see stories told, right? The stories, they're there way, 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 way back, right? They might've been forgotten. They might be underground, right? And so we're rewriting stories. And so I think one of the best things that we can do as well is to like recognize the story that the brain is telling and not over attached to it, right? Because stories
question it.
Exactly. Like stories can have multiple endings. Stories can change depending on one character's action, right? And so like when, I know like a big one for me was like, when I was first working with the Reiki, everyone's like, oh, put your hands on your body. And the Reiki would consistently, like, I would feel like someone was pulling my arms out. Right. So, right. And so like, at first, like my brain was like, oh my God, what the heck is happening? This is crazy. And like, literally wanted to like get up and run away. And then I kind of sat with myself for a little while and just like, let myself like do the energy healing like this with my hands out. And what came through later was like, I needed to clear the layers before I could like, right. And so as I'm like, I'm supposed to put my hands on my body. And the energy is like, nah, girl, we got to start.
You're not ready for it. We
gotta start out here. And so there was that again, right? Like that story of like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Cause it literally felt like something else was moving my body. And then that having to come back into trust, right? Having to come back in to like trusting that the energy has my best intention at heart, right? Like trusting that like I also have my best intention at heart, right?
Yes,
that, like,
exactly.
That it is happening in the way it's meant to happen. And also like in the moment, right? Like not trying to create the story, but letting the story emerge.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great. And that trusting, your body always has your body has its own wisdom, its own story, its own way. Like there is a reason you unintentionally do certain actions when you're feeling certain ways, because that is your body's way of processing it versus your brain's way of processing it. And to trust that, like, okay, they're telling you put it on, but if that's not what your body wants to do, then.
And when I say like they were telling me, I meant like external teachers, right? We're saying this is how it's supposed to be, right? Like this is how you do a treatment. And like being like, well, but this is what I'm supposed to do, right? This is what the teacher told me to do. And then trusting my body. Because I think that that's the other big piece about like coming back into relationship is like, and like, honestly, the way I teach is very like I'm making suggestions, right? Like I'm like speaking from my personal like experience, but like each of us, again, like the point is to trust our own body wisdom, right? And to trust in the body. And like one that always comes up is like pretty much like collectively, right? Like if we were to like stub our toe or hit our knee, our first response is to like put our hands on it, right? Is to put our hands on it. And to me, that speaks to like the like innate healing power of our hands, of our body, right? To like immediately put hands on the hurt place to send healing there, right? To send love there, to send comfort there. And so that's the other piece too, where it's like, I feel like we've been conditioned to distrust our impulses and to override our impulses. And so a lot of this is unpacking, unwinding from that and relearning how to trust the impulses to tend to ourselves, right? Because like we breathe in and we're not having to like consciously think about our lungs doing the work to process, right? We eat food and we don't have to like consciously be like, okay, stomach, now's the time. Like the body just does it, right? Like same thing with like when it's time to expel waste. Like it's not like we're like, okay, let me, like make this happen. The body just does it, right? And like maybe not always in the most convenient ways, but like, it's like the body just is this own like ecosystem that knows how to function, knows how to like transform nutrients into life and how to transform air and like purify itself. Like I think of like, I live in the South and it's really hot and I sweat a lot. And like, sometimes it's really annoying. And then sometimes I'm like, you know what? My body is super, super good at like processing toxins, at like, like trying to like regulate my body temperature. Like, good job, body. I know I'm dripping sweat, but my body's doing its work right now. And I think just like remembering and honoring that. Cause like, again, like we're so taught to feel ashamed of our body's natural rhythms and natural movements. Like I think of like one that's really funny actually is like, I've always been like, actually not as much anymore. And maybe this is the energy work, like having done its work, but I'd always been a big burper. Like I burp a lot.
Oh,
and
interesting.
And so most of us are taught like, suppress your burps, do not burp, right? Don't burp in public. And I've always just been like a belcher. And it's so funny because I had an energy teacher once, or not, and she was doing a session on me and she was like, I want to let you know that all sorts of like body noises, burps, gurgles, farts are welcome here because that is the way of the body moving energy, right? Like you're releasing and moving energy as you are releasing these gases and bubbling and gurgling and stuff. That like just made so much sense to me. It dropped in and was like, oh yeah, like this is a way that my body is clearing naturally, right? Is trying to like do its natural cleansing thing. And yet we're taught to like suppress these things and like be ashamed of these things. And so it's no wonder that our bodies have so much trapped, dense energy from the past that often needs to be unwound and clear before we can really be in relationship with our bodies. Because I'll say that like, it definitely took me many years of like working with the energy and unwinding to really feel a sense of home in my body.
No. And I like what you said about acknowledging that your body is, because that was one of the things I had to do when I was learning how to accept goosebumps as just a thing that happens sometimes and doesn't mean there's a threat. I would be like, oh, interesting. Like there was a cool breeze. Oh, that's awesome. My body's trying to capture heat. Like, you know what I mean? I really had to break it down, I guess, in a more scientific way of looking at your body as this organism that's taking care of you, you know what I mean? Of the brain, even though they're the same thing, but
totally.
No, it's really interesting. Should we get into your Reiki?
Oh yeah, a little practice.
Magic. I did actually have a question about Reiki before we started. What are there different types? Because I know you do holy fire Reiki. Is that like what does that mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. So Reiki is originated in Japan, right? Reiki is a Japanese word and it translates as spiritually wise life force energy, right? Ki, like chi, life force energy, and then rei is like a very respectful way, or like a way of creating some sacredness there. And so yes, there are different lineages, right? So like some folks who work with it, like as they work with this energy, like won't even call it Reiki anymore. They'll just call it like sacred life force energy or divine energy. And so I've been trained in both the kind of what they call the traditional lineage, so Usui Reiki, which was channeled into Japan in like the late 1800s, like early 1900s. And really like, you know, what I see as like the legacy of Usui was like, he really wanted people to reclaim their spiritual might without having to like look to an external authority, right? So he wanted people to feel that kind, or be able to have that kind of spiritual journey of ascension without needing to depend on some external institution or person. And so he saw this Reiki healing as a way to both like heal the like body, mind, and soul, but also to like kind of ascend, if that makes sense. And then the holy fire Reiki was channeled in by a man named William Rand. And the way that I think of it is just like an upgrade, right? So like when I think of just like evolution, right? Like too big of an evolutionary jump can be really jarring for everyone involved. And so it tends to come in these like kind of like slower cycles. And so I think of like the Usui Reiki as like what was needed in that kind of like turn of the century time. And that energy worked on the planet and channeled into the planet and worked with people. And then we became ready for a higher level,
for the next.
Right. And so there are all sorts of folks who are like channeling in higher and higher levels of energy to help kind of help us ascend, right? Help us rise. And so, yeah, I think of it as like an upgrade, right? Where it's like, like
that makes sense.
And I'll say like from working with both, like, because I worked with the Usui Reiki for a while before I was trained in the Holy Fire Reiki. And it really does feel like a software update, right? Where like, it's a lot more, like it doesn't need to be as directed as much, right? Like it doesn't need as much of the kind of like the word cumbersome is coming through, right? Where it's like, it's just a little like pure and cleaner, and not just like, that's not to say that, right? But it's just like, it's just like, I think of like anytime that we like purify like oil or anything, like the more refinement that we do to it, right? Like the purer its essence is. And so it kind of feels like that. Yeah. And I'll say too, that like this energy is, like is accessible to all of us. And where I feel like cause there's an attunement process for the Reiki. And I feel like what that process is really a coming back into relationship, right? Where like, we all can work with sacred energy. We all can work with our own energy. We can tap into all these different energies. And with the Reiki attunement, it feels like the difference between like going up to someone cold and being like, hey, like, do you want to be my friend? And having a friend be like, this is my friend. Okay. They're awesome. Like be friends with them, right? Kind of situation where it's just like, there's just like a slightly like deeperness that you can dive when you're like brought into the relationship by someone who's already in relationship. If that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. Awesome. Okay. I don't think I had ever asked you that.
I don't think we'd ever talked about that before.
Accepted the holy fire. I was like, okay, that makes sense. But then I was like, oh, I think there are other types of Reiki. Okay. Awesome.
There definitely is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I want to name the free gift that I'm offering too before we move into the embodiment practice that we're going to do. So I'll be hosting a free live embodiment masterclass for all the folks who have attended and are interested. You can find more details in the link below. We'll essentially just be moving through more embodiment practices and learning ways to really integrate embodiment into our daily lives. Because I think it can feel really abstract or something like we need to schedule it, right? Versus something that can just be a part of how we move through the world. So we'll be talking about that in that free online masterclass. So please sign up if you're interested.
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. So I'm going to do, for our embodiment practice, I am going to invite the Reiki to work with each of us. So as we move into the practice, Reiki is very much an energy that respects free will. And so it wants us to invite it to work with us or claim the healing. So as we move into the process, I will invoke the Reiki. And if you are open and willing to working with that energy, you can just say, I'm open and willing, either in your head or out loud. And what we're going to be doing is just like a hands-on, we're going to kind of be using our hands to help give our body some sense of containment, to send ourselves some love. Again, like, I think it's really common for us to feel ways about touching ourselves in this society. There's some shame around that. And I have found in my own practice that kind of self-touch, where I'm reminding myself of my containment, my boundaries, right? Where I'm giving myself some comforting, has really been the difference between like me moving into kind of like overwhelm and freak out and me being able to stay present with whatever situation is happening. All right.
Yeah. Before we start, people don't need anything special?
No,
like,
no tool,
just yourself and your hands.
Yep, okay, just you and your hands. Cool. And again, like, trust your body here, right? Like if you want to be sitting, sit. If you want to stand up and move, move. If you don't want to have your hands, as I said before, right, directly on your body, maybe you just want them in your energy field. Like, trust yourself. Like you're your best teacher, right? Like all of the rest of us are here to kind of like support and guide. And at the end of the day, our body is the teacher that we should listen to at the end of the day. All right. So I'm going to invite everyone to just maybe take a breath in here. We've been saying a lot. So our brains are probably really active. So I'll invite us into our bodies by just breathing in and out a couple times. And as we breathe in and out, I'm going to invite the Holy Fire Reiki to work with all of us who are willing to receive healing, all of us who are ready to reclaim our embodied power, step into the next level of our own self-love. And I'll just invite that Reiki to work with us, and we can just sit in a place of trust, trusting that this energy has our highest good in mind, trusting that we don't actually need to do anything, but open to receive and allow ourselves to surrender just a little bit. And as we allow that loving warmth, that Reiki energy to move in, I'll invite you to maybe start rubbing your hands together. Rubbing our hands together can activate some really powerful sensations. It can create some heat. It can bring our minds away from like our thinking mind and focus them on one single sensation. So you can stay here, keep rubbing your hands if that feels good. And then when you feel ready, I'm going to invite you to place your hands on your head. You can place your hands on the top of your head, on your forehead. I'm just going to invite you to just trust your intuition here. You can stay in one spot, or you can kind of move your hands as feels good. And as we have hands on body here, we're just going to imagine that we're sending ourselves love, that we're sending ourselves gratitude. Just feeling how we can hold ourselves and support ourselves here. Maybe we want to place our hands around our jaw. I know I hold a lot of tension in my jaw. This really simple practice of just giving ourselves containment can offer a lot of ease to our nervous systems, to our minds. Maybe you want to even place hands over ears. Just feeling some love flow into your body here. Maybe you want to send yourself some gratitude, some self-forgiveness. Just really honoring yourself. And again, just trusting your body wisdom here. Maybe touching on your head feels too much and we want to maybe just give ourselves a hug. Feel our hands on our body, on our biceps. Maybe we don't want to just feel the hands. We want to give ourselves maybe gentle squeezes. Maybe we want to just kind of gently rub our arms. Just really giving ourselves permission to hold ourselves here, right? To feel our body containment, to feel our own love for ourselves. Continuing to let ourselves breathe here, continuing to let ourselves let go of anything that wants to be released right now. Maybe we want to give our shoulders a little rub. I know I hold a lot of tension there. Give ourselves just a little gentle massage. Maybe we want to rub on the front of our chest, really anywhere, anything that feels good. Might also feel inclined to maybe do some tapping. Maybe you want to do some tapping on your body. Whatever feels good here. And if you want to sway, if you want to move, if you want to stand, trust yourself. Do what your body is asking you to do here, right? There's no right and wrong. It's just a sense of coming home to yourself. And this practice can really help us trust ourselves a little more, right? To trust that we are wise, infinite beings, that our bodies have our best interest at heart. And if this is feeling really challenging, I invite you to just like open your eyes and look around the room, right? Ground back into your space. Remember where you are, right? Remember where your body sits in time and space, right? Sometimes when we go within, we need to kind of fluctuate between focusing inward and focusing out, right? All right, so we've given ourselves some really good containment here. I'm going to invite us to maybe do a little bit of stretching as well. Maybe we want to take up a little bit more space here, reaching our arms above, maybe reaching our arms to the side. Maybe we want to widen our stance, how we're sitting, right? Just take up a little bit more space, right? Own that your body gets to take up space, right? I think sometimes, especially for those of us who are socialized as women, we're taught to make ourselves small, right? To compress ourselves. But right now, in this moment, you get to be big and expansive. So I'm going to invite you to just take up space in a way that feels good for you, right? Maybe that looks like even just like letting your jaw open. Right? Whatever feels good for you here to take up just a little more space. Really trusting, right? As we stretch our bodies, move our bodies, we make space within our bodies for more of the good in life, right? For more of that expansive, fresh energy. Too often we treat our bodies like statues. We stay in one position for too long. And so it can be, we can turn to stone in that way, right? But our bodies are mostly water. Water wants to flow. Water wants to move, but water will also be contained if it's not given the space to flow. So when we move our bodies, stretch our bodies, expand our bodies, we give that energy space within ourselves. And I'm feeling called to invite us to do some arm movements here. Start with whatever side of your body you call. We're going to just use one arm right now. And we're going to kind of bring the arm up and around as we breathe in, and then just pull it down on our exhale, bringing our energy back to our center. Again, breathing in, pulling that arm up and above. And as we exhale, bringing that energy back down to our core. One more time on that side, if that feels good. Breathing in, pulling our energy back to ourselves. Breathing out, bringing it down, anchoring into our core. You can stay with that arm if that feels good, or you can switch arms and just notice how it feels as you switch arms. Breathing in with the other arm, pulling that up and above. Breathing out, bringing that arm down, feeling your energy come back to your center, to your core. Again, breathing in, gathering up all those pieces of self that we might have left behind, and exhaling, bringing it back, bringing it back, bringing it back. One more on that side, breathing in, gathering up all of those parts of self that we might have abandoned, and then just bringing it back on an exhale to our core. And then I'll invite us to just do that same practice with both arms. Again, noticing the difference of how that felt. We're going to bring both arms up as we breathe in above our head. And on our exhale, we'll just bring it down. Again, breathing in, pulling our arms up above our head. And on our exhale, bringing it down to our core. One more time here. And out, pulling that energy back to ourselves. I'll invite you to follow your body intuition here. Give yourself any kind of final movements that feel good, right? Maybe you want to give yourself a little bit more containment. Maybe you want to rub on parts of your body. Maybe you even want to kind of like bounce your feet on the ground, feel that connection below. Or sway your hips, bring some juiciness back into your hips. Whenever you feel ready, I'll invite you to keep breathing here. Just slowly bring those movements to a close, right? Like you can keep swaying, you can keep kind of holding, but just bring yourself back to a kind of still place where you can just kind of reflect and notice. How did that feel for you? Was that challenging? Did it feel nourishing? Was it uncomfortable? Was your body speaking to you? Did you listen? I'll invite the Reiki to just flow through us one final time now, taking from us anything that is ready to be released, anything that doesn't serve us, just allowing anything we're ready to let go of to just move out of our bodies, out through the bottoms of our feet and into the earth the earth that can transform anything into nutrients. We can give her anything, and she will transform it into love and light and nourishment. Sending gratitude out to the Reiki for the work that's done here, trusting that all the healing that's meant to come to completion in this moment is. The healing is complete. And remembering that energy is timeless, right? And so it might take a sleep cycle or a couple sleep cycles or a couple interactions for this energy to really work through us, right? And just trusting that it has our highest good in mind, and that our bodies are constantly moving towards wholeness and towards love. And then, if you want to like shake a little bit to integrate that or whatever feels good, if stillness is feeling juicy, stay in that. Thank you, Reiki.
That was awesome. One thing you had said at the very beginning when we started was that like you can take this anywhere with you. It's whatever. And you sighed a lot. And that is one thing that I have taken away actually from our time together, different times we've worked together and just, our conversations. I sigh a lot now because it is like so interesting to me how it really does just like relieve so much, because we do I know for myself, especially even when I sleep, I tend to sleep on my stomach like this.
Like tight hands.
Yeah. And during this, I felt like pushing on my chest, which is interesting. I did Emily's interview earlier today, and I now have like a cough that I like feel like I need to get out, but it's not like a sickness. It's like a pressure relieving. Yeah. And during this, even like I could feel my chest muscles like feeling really constricted and wanting to relax. So this is really interesting of needing to pay attention to that space and not cramp up so much when I sleep, at least, and take those opportunities to
stretch for sure. And like, I love that you named that, like you could feel the tension more clearly, right? Because I think that's one of the reasons I myself, right, have avoided coming home to the body, is that like, then I'm forced to actually face what's here, right? Like I can't ignore it or run away with it. I have to face the tension that's in my shoulders or in my back. And yet, again, like working with the Reiki has felt so empowering because it's taken me from this place of like, I just have to accept this. There's nothing that I can do, to like, I actually have the power to release this tension, right? To clear this tension, not just the tension from this lifetime, but from all lifetimes, from my ancestry, right? That like, I can reclaim that, right? That embodied power to heal, that when we come to the present, when we come to the bodies, we can heal, not just this lifetime, but all lifetimes. And so I feel like that's so much of the medicine, right? It's not like, oh, we just have to deal with the pain, right? I hear a lot of people, I just have to accept that I'll always be in pain. I've heard that a lot from people that I work with. And I gently try to nudge, right, towards a different mindset that like, actually, like, I don't have to accept this. It might be present with me right now, but that doesn't mean it will always be here, right? And that like changing of that narrative, changing of that story can be super challenging and scary, and also super empowering, right? Because like we have the ability to heal our bodies, to heal our world. And as we do that inside, it ripples out, right? It creates more space for healing for everyone. And that's the other piece with like reclaiming our embodied power, right? When we are embodied and empowered, we invite other people to be embodied, to be empowered, right? We're not powering over people, right? We're not trying to dominate people, right? We are just empowered and embodied and inviting others to live in that same way.
Yeah, no, I 1000% agree. It's like the more you work on yourself, the more other people see it, and the more, you know, if you react to their imbalances in a balanced way, it does tend to stop people because they're expecting you to react in the same way they're reacting. And it does make people question their own their own senses, their own reasonings for why they do things, and hopefully will inspire some sort of change in their life. But and I also think this work for me has again reinforced, like, I'm only responsible for myself. I only have to be, I only can be. You know, even if, and again, I don't have any children, but I know a lot of people who have kids are always like, you know, I gotta do for them. But again, yes, you could take care of these other people in your life, these little people in your life, but you have to do it for yourself in order for it to ripple out to them. Like,
well, and what a powerful modeling, right? To show our young ones what it looks like to prioritize ourselves and our needs, right? Because we unintentionally teach them to override their impulses when we override our impulses in front of them, right? Like it's not intentional, right? And yet like they learn from us, like their body wisdom is so strong when they're young. And so they can see the way that we repress ourselves, right? Like even if they don't know how to verbalize it, even if we don't know how to verbalize it, right? Like there is this kind of intuitive body wisdom that young ones like just are tapped into. And so as we honor our bodies, right, we show them that they can do the same, right? Like,
no, this is awesome. This is great. And we would love to hear from you, the viewer, what things came up for you, like what, you know, what were there any modifications that, you know, when it's like touch your chest and you felt like, no, I can't touch my chest, or oh, this, like, for instance, I'm sweaty right now. Like
I'm super sweaty too.
And that has happened before when I worked with Kristen. She did a group thing, I think last summer, that I was a part of, and I remember after one, I was like so hot, and I was drinking like ice cold water the whole time. It wasn't even hot in my house. It was really interesting. So any body sensations that came up for
Yeah.
you while that, feel free to, you know, reply to any of the emails that we send out during the week for these videos, or email Kristen directly. We'll shout out her her socials and her email in a second, but they're also included in there. So before we do that, is there anything else you want to share?
I wanted to name that, like, if anyone else was experiencing heat, like that's a super common way of experiencing the Reiki in our bodies, as heat, as tingles, as sometimes honestly, like the opposite, I'll get really cold. It just kind of depends. But like looping back to like what I had said before, because I do tend to sweat a lot, is like that is a natural way that our body is releasing toxins, right? And so like, even though it can be uncomfortable and weird, and like we've also been taught to like feel ashamed of the fact that we sweat, right? That like, that is just like our body like doing the healing, right? It's evidence that we can gather that like our body is actually super wise and doing the healing for us, that we don't actually have to do anything, like it can do it. So I just want to name that, because like it's so easy, I know even myself, to get really uncomfortable, or I'm like,
or I know when I raised my arms, I was like, am I gonna have huge sweat patches?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, and like, as someone who's like, that is like constant life struggle of mine, like I am a sweaty gal. Like, I was like, I feel ya.
I love just call it, just reclaim your sweatiness. That's the moral of today.
I love
that's that. So funny. Well, where can people reach you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm on YouTube, Roots of Radiance Reiki. If you're interested, I have meditations on there. I have embodiment stuff. I have just like talking about, you know, channeling wisdom and stuff like that. My website's the same, Roots of Radiance Reiki. I'm on Instagram, though I'm not on there as much as like some people are on there. Same, Roots of Radiance Reiki. And I'll include, that'll all be under. So if you want to reach out, if you want to work with me, I do Reiki healing sessions, I do group work. And this work is super poignant right now, right? I feel like we are all being invited to show up in different, more healed ways. And there's lots of people out here right now who are here to support us in doing that work. And I feel super grateful to be one of them.
And I'm so grateful that you are one of them. So, well, thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to hearing about your experience with Reiki and with Kristen's work. And I hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you in the next session.
Bye.